Okay, the concept of this video is to help you better understand the concept of slope. I know today you told me that you were starting with linear equations. So I went into your linear equations unit 4 and just kind of briefly went through just lesson 4.1.1 to see what you're being taught in there. So this video will give you a little bit of support on how to solve for slope when you are given a graph and when you are not given a graph. So first thing I want to cover is like what is slope. So I'm going to do like a thought bubble. So we have the word slope. We know that the definitions of a slope is the steepness of a line, including direction. So for what that means is like, is it going to be a positive direction or a negative direction? And I'm going to show you how you can figure that out. The other definition of slope would be the rate of change. Okay, so like I said, these are the definitions of slope. The next thing that I want to go over is like ways to calculate it and how to write them out algebraically. So you may remember rise over run from geometry. Remember, rise is going to be anything up, meaning that it's going to be positive, or it could be down, meaning that it could be negative. And run is when the line goes either to the right or to the left. That's rise over run. And then the last thing that you need to know is that in algebra, when we write slopes, we write change in y over change in x. So this triangle, the meaning of this triangle in math and like Greek terms, it means change in, the change in. So the change in y over the change in x. And just a reminder that these are ways to calculate slope. Okay, so you have your definitions up top, the ways to calculate it on the bottom of that thought bubble. So the next thing I want to show you is how the heck do I know if a line has a positive or a negative slope? So if you're given a graph and we're going to see lines that go this way, we're going to see lines, oops, that's the same line. Let me delete that. See lines that go this way. One of these is positive and one of these is negative. So the way that you are able to identify whether it's positive or negative is essentially you are going to read your graph from left to right. You're going to read it from left to right, and you're going to see which way your arrow, which way that line is moving. So if we read this first graph from left to right, we can tell and see and identify, hopefully, that this is a positive slope because that line is going up from left to right. So it starts down here, and from left to right, it rises. If we look at the second example, we can tell now, reading from left to right, if we start here and read to the right, this line is going down. So this would be a negative slope. Okay, so that's one thing you're going to want to make sure when you're looking at these graphs, whenever you get a graph, is to identify whether it's a positive or a negative slope. All right, so moving on, the first thing that I want to show you is how the heck to solve these, how to calculate slope when you're given a graph. So I'm going to draw a graph. I'm actually going to go change my paper. There we go. I'm going to draw a graph. Not very well, but whatever, right? Black. I'm going to draw a line. You remember these graphs from geometry. And I'm just going to label each line. And then 1 and 2, this is -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. Actually, you know what, I don't want to do that. I'm actually going to count by twos. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, -2, -4, -6, -8, -10, 2, 4, 6, 8, and we'll do 10, and then -2, -4, -6, -8, -10. So I'm going to put a point on, let's do, let's go here. This is going to be a big one. Put a point here, and let's put a point here. All right, so the first thing that we can do is we can identify what our X and Y values are. So for this point down here, if we look at our X-axis, I'm gonna highlight the X-axis in green. So this is our X-axis, and I'm gonna highlight the Y-axis in yellow, and this is our Y-axis. So if we write down what our points are, this one down here on the far bottom right, the X-axis is 8, and the Y-axis is -8. So I counted over, so 2, 4, 6, 8, and then I went down 2, 4, 6, 8. And remember that we write these X, Y value. And then we go up to the top here. This is on our X value is 0, and our Y is +6. Remember, that's X, Y. All right, so we have our 2 points. Like I said, when you're given a graph, the first thing that you want to do is connect the points with the triangle. So I'm going to change my color here so we can see this. So here's our first point. I'm just going to connect them by drawing a triangle. So here, this is going to be a really terrible line, but I'm going to do my best. There we go. So the first way we can solve this slope is by using that rise over run concept. So remember, and the one thing I didn't do, which I'll go do now, is I didn't even draw my line. Here's my line. There we go. So I just told you that when you read, make sure that you identify if this is a positive or negative slope. So if we read left to right, this line is going down. So we know we're going to have a negative slope here. So since we know we're going to have a negative slope, to figure out our rise over run, we already know it's a negative rise, because if we start up here at the 6 and count down, we're going to have a negative number. So I'm going to change this color to green and just identify when I count a box. So if I start up here at the 6, I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So my rise is -7, and then my run is 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 to the right, and that's positive. So my rise over run for this line is -7/4. A second way to solve this is calculating when you're given 2 points. When you're given 2 points, so let's just take the points that we have here. So we have 0, 6, and 8, -8. What I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a table, and I'm going to just write those points in my table. So 0 over 6, 8 over -8. Okay? And then I'm going to subtract. Essentially, I'm going to take these two numbers and I'm going to subtract them. So 0 minus 8 is -8. 6 minus -8 is 14. So we have 14 over 8. And remember, we write it and change over y, change over x. So we have 14 over 8. We can reduce this. right? And it's a -8, I'm sorry. We can reduce this. We can divide each number by 2 and get 7 over -4. And if you notice, this number matches this number, the same number that we got from the triangle. So there's 2 ways that you can solve for slope, and those are the 2 ways that you can do it. So I'm going to give you another example. Let's say we have 0.43 and -5.8. So the first thing that we do is we're going to make a table, and we're going to have our XY table. We're going to have 4, 3, -5, and 8. Remember that we subtract these 2 numbers. Keep the negatives where they are, and then just put in your subtraction signs. And you might want to have a calculator just because, you know, a calculator is always great to have on hand. So 4 minus -5 gives us 9, and 8 minus 3 gives us a -5. Remember, we write change in y over change in x, so our answer becomes -5 over 9. Now, when I was in your Apex class, I saw that they were doing it a little differently as far as figuring out your x and y. They made a subtraction problem. So I'll show you that. Yours could look like this. Slope equals, so remember we have our x, y values. So if the top number of slope is the y, the change in y, what you do is that you take your 2 numbers and you subtract them. So our 2 y's are 3 and 8, so we would do 3 minus 8, and then we would do 4 minus -5, and that gives us -5 over 9. So you end up with the same answer. It's just that your video is going to show you a little bit differently. All right, that is it for slope. From what I can see for your first lesson, if you come across something that you're still a little bit confused about, just let me know, send me an email, and I'll be glad to help.